Today's lesson is 1.2.1, creating linear equations in one variable. And our objective for today is students will be able to create equations in one variable to solve problems. So last week we were creating expressions, now we're moving on to creating equations. So this time everything will be equal to something. Let's start off with vocabulary. And we have 4 vocabulary words, or 4 terms today. And the first one is linear equation. So a linear equation is an equation that can be written in the form ax plus bx equals c. I think I just said ax plus bx. It's ax plus b equals c, where a, b, and c are all rational numbers. Another way that you might have seen this in the past is y equals mx plus b. The point is that we have a term being multiplied by x, a constant, and then what it's equal to. So here we have a term being multiplied by x, a constant, and then over here what it's equal to. So that's our first word, linear equation. The next vocab word is variables. And variables, we know, are letters used to represent an unknown quantity. This isn't necessarily a term that's new to us, just one we need to be reminded of. And our third term is solution, which solution is also a term that or a vocabulary word that we've gone over recently. That's the value that satisfies an equation. And then finally, our last word is unit rate. And unit rate is the rate per one given unit. So let's go on to our first example is about James. So James earns $15 per hour as a bank teller. In 1 week, he pays 17% of his earnings in state and federal taxes. His take-home pay for the week is $460.65. How many hours did James work? Let's go through a process to help us answer this question. So the first process is to read the problem, or the first step in the process is read the problem. So I'm going to read through this again and mark some things up. James earns $15 per hour as a bank teller. So that right here, $15 per hour, seems important to me. It's a rate. In 1 week, he pays 17% of his earnings in state and federal taxes. So I noticed that he pays 17%. And remember, we want to include what he's paying that percentage of. Last week we had a hard time taking our percentages and multiplying them by whatever they need to be multiplied by. So I've underlined that it's 17% of his 17%, and that it's his earnings. His take-home pay for the week is $460.65. And the question is asking me how many hours. How many hours did James work? So step 1, I read the problem. Step 2, I'm going to list the knowns. And when I say the knowns, I'm talking about what things I know. So those are the things that I already went through and underlined. So what is known? Well, I know that my rate equals $15 per hour. I know that taxes are 17% of take-home, or of the total income. And I know that the take-home was $460.65. Let's move on to step 3, which is to list the unknowns. So what things are unknown? Well, first of all, I need to figure out how many hours he worked. So I'm going to say T, which is time, or hours worked, is something that is unknown right now. Another thing that is unknown right now is his pay before taxes. I know that he got paid, he took home $460.65, and I know that he had to pay 17%, but I don't know how much he got paid originally. So these things are my unknowns. Okay, and moving on to step 4, I'm going to go ahead and create my equation. And I want to do that the same way I did last week, where I would do a verbal model and then I would do my algebraic model after that. So let's still use this problem, but we're going to go on to a new page. So first thing I know for my actual verbal model is that he got paid a certain rate. His pay rate, from that, they took away the taxes. So if we take the rate that he got paid and we subtract the taxes, that's going to give us the take-home, or how much money he got in his paycheck. This verbal model represents what I am going to be putting into how I'm going to be creating an equation. So let's take it back to the previous screen. I already know the pay rate. I wrote that my pay rate was $15 per hour. Now what I don't know is how many hours he works. So I know that I'm going to have 15 and I need to multiply it by hours. So let's say he worked 1 hour, that would be $15. If he worked 2 hours, that'd be 15 times 2, which is $30. So my rate is $15 times how many hours he worked. Since I don't know how many hours he works, I'm going to do 15 times x, or 15x. Minus, tax is something that comes out of your paycheck, so we have to subtract it. 17% in taxes, which I know that to create a decimal, I have to move the decimal over 2 places to the left, or I could do 17 divided by 100, which will also give me 0.17. 17% of the taxes, those taxes were on how much money I made. If you go back and look right here, we made a note that it's 17% of the earnings. Well, I represented the earnings by multiplying $15 an hour times how many hours. So I have my 17% tax rate. I need to multiply that by my earnings, which my earnings is the same thing as 15x. $15 per hour. 17% of taxes taken from $15 per hour. Next part of my model is the equal sign. And then the take-home pay, which on the previous screen we mentioned was $460.65. So step number 4 was to create an expression or an equation, which I have done right here. Let's go back and do step 5. So step 5 was to solve. A couple weeks ago in our review, we talked about how to solve linear equations. So let's go ahead and solve it. First thing I need to do is multiply. 0.17 times 15x is going to give me 2.55. Bring down my minus, bring down the 15x. And bring down equals 460. Next, I need to combine like terms together. So let's combine these. 15 minus 2.55x is going to give me 12.45x. And finally, I need to split up 1245 and x. So I'm going to divide each side of my equation. And that leaves me with x equals 37. Final step I need to do is to interpret in context. So I know that x, or that my variable, equals 37, but what does that mean? I just realized I did make a mistake. I wrote t as my variable previously, and then I just used x. It's not going to make a difference. It really doesn't matter which variable we use. So we're using x, or maybe you used t, or maybe you used something else. It's okay. The point is we found out that the answer was 37. Now, what does that mean in terms of this, in context of this problem? Well, the question asked me, how many hours did James work? My answer was 37. So in context, my answer will be James worked 37 hours. Make sure you took down notes. If you forgot to take down notes, please go back and at least write down the steps and the vocabulary words. Those are kind of the most important parts of this. And don't forget to do your quiz at the end of the lesson.